I never wanted to leave the city, but after everything that happened, after I lost my job, after the breakup, I figured I could use a reset. Something slower, quieter. So I packed what little I had and moved into a cheap rental on the outskirts of a small Midwestern town called Avery Hill. It was the kind of place where the streets rolled empty by 9 p.m. and people waved at strangers just because. My house was on Pine Street, the very last one before the woods took over. It was old but charming in a way. Peeling white paint, creaky porch, attic window with a cracked pane. The rent was suspiciously low, but I wasn't in a position to ask questions. The first time I noticed something was off was my second night there. I woke up around 2 a.m. to a scraping sound outside my bedroom window. Like something was being dragged slowly across the wall. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, but when I looked outside, there was nothing but shadows and the line of trees across the street. I blamed the wind. The next morning, I met my neighbors. Directly across from me lived the Bellamy family, Harold and June, both in their late 50s, and their adult son, Thomas, who looked like he'd never quite grown out of the awkwardness of adolescence. They were friendly. Too friendly. "Welcome to Pine Street," June said as she handed me a pie that smelled like cinnamon and something faintly metallic. "If you need anything, just knock." I smiled and thanked them, but something about the way Thomas kept staring, unblinking, from behind her shoulder made my skin crawl. That night, I didn't touch the pie. By the end of the first week, I started noticing more. Sometimes, I'd hear footsteps on my porch at night, slow, deliberate steps. Once, I found small handprints on my window the size of a child's, even though no kids lived nearby. Then there were the lights. Every night around 3:17 a.m., the Bellamy's living room light would flicker on and off 3 times. Then it would go dark. Same pattern. Every night. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I stayed up and watched through the gap in my curtains. At exactly 3:17, the light blinked once, twice, 3 times. I squinted into the darkness, and for a split second, I saw movement, dozens of shadows shifting behind their living room window, like people were gathered. But when I blinked again, it was just the 3 of them, standing perfectly still. Staring out the window. At me. I dropped the curtain and didn't sleep that night. The next day, I asked around town about the Bellamys. Most people gave vague answers, old family, kept to themselves, real polite folks. But one old man who ran the hardware store leaned in and said, "They've lived on Pine Street longer than the trees. Folks used to say there were others living there before the Bellamys. But no one ever saw them leave." I tried to laugh it off. Then came the scratching. Not outside, but inside. In the walls. Beneath the floorboards. Sometimes whispering followed it. Muffled, like someone murmuring through drywall. I thought I was going crazy. It's not surprising. I was going through the most difficult period of my life. My relationship broke up right before the wedding. I also lost my job. Do you think it's a coincidence? No, my fiancé just slept with my boss. No coincidence. That's it. I always had a tense relationship with my family, and at some point it seemed like a good idea to move to a small town, for a while, maybe half a year, or a year, to collect myself piece by piece. But now I think it's a really bad idea. I wish I'd just gone to a psychologist. Because I think I'm really going crazy. I'm afraid of my neighbors. Just a weird family, nothing more. Look at me. I go to supermarkets and ask locals about my neighbors. Like in a damn TV series. LOL. Not outside, but inside. In the walls. Beneath the floorboards. Sometimes whispering followed it. Muffled, like someone murmuring through drywall. I started sleeping with the TV on just to drown it out. The static, the late-night infomercials, anything was better than the creeping sound of voices I couldn't place. But even then, sometimes, the volume would lower on its own. Not mute. Just soft enough for the whispers to return. One evening, as I was taking the trash out, I noticed June Bellamy across the street, standing perfectly still on her porch. She had her hands clasped in front of her, eyes locked on my front door. Not on me. Just the door. Her lips moved silently, like she was counting. I waved awkwardly. She didn't blink. Later that night, I peeked out through the blinds. She was still there. Same position. Still watching. But now, Harold was beside her, and they were both holding something. It was a pair of binoculars. I closed the blinds. The next morning, I decided to go confront them, ask what the hell they were doing. But when I stepped out onto my porch, there was a small, covered dish waiting at my feet. Warm to the touch. A note taped to the top that simply said, "Thought you could use a warm breakfast." No name. No knock. Nothing. I left it on the porch. By the afternoon, it was gone. A few days later, I noticed Thomas again. He was standing at the tree line across from my house, halfway hidden by the pines. Just staring. Not moving. I went back inside, closed the curtains, and didn't leave for 2 days. Then things escalated. I came home from a grocery run and found my front door unlocked. I never leave it unlocked. Nothing was stolen, but a few things had been moved. Subtle things. The coffee mug I always left in the sink was now dry and clean. A pair of socks that had been crumpled on the floor were neatly folded on the bed. The most disturbing thing was in the bathroom. The mirror had fogged up. Not like from a shower, but like someone had breathed on it. And across the glass, I could see faint streaks, wiped clean with fingers. Like someone had stood there, watching themselves. For a long time. I installed a deadbolt the next day. And a camera. I checked the footage every morning. Nothing. Until 3 nights later. At 3:14 a.m., the footage showed a figure walk into frame. From the side yard. Not from the street. Someone tall. Thin. Wearing something loose, maybe a nightgown or robe. No visible face. They came right up to the porch and stood there, just out of view of the doorbell cam, for over an hour. Completely still. Then they walked away. I went to the police. They said it was probably a drifter. A prank. People like to mess with new folks, the deputy said. Give it a week. They'll get bored. They didn't. The next time I saw the Bellamys, all 3 of them were in their yard. It was late, well past midnight, but they were digging. A deep, wide hole in their backyard. No lights. No talking. Just the dull sound of shovels scraping earth. I stood in the dark of my hallway, watching from behind the curtain. They dug for hours. By sunrise, the hole was gone. Just a patch of fresh dirt. No tools. No sign it had ever happened. That same day, I saw Thomas again. He was sitting at the end of my driveway. Legs crossed. Just sitting. I opened the front door and yelled at him to get off my property. He didn't move. Didn't even look at me. He just said, "We never left." And then he walked away. That night, I slept with a knife under my pillow. I've been keeping my lights on the 24th of July now. But it doesn't help much. The camera shows them standing at the edge of my yard most nights. Sometimes Harold. Sometimes June. Sometimes all three. They never cross the line. Never speak. Just watch. And sometimes, God help me, I hear them in the walls again. Not scratching anymore. Breathing. I don't understand what to do. The police can't open a case because the neighbors haven't broken anything. They are standing on the edge of the yard, not crossing private property. They don't even talk to me. I can see how the police think I'm crazy because I have nothing, no conversations, no actions. I just don't like the way my neighbors look at my house. It really does sound very strange. But I'm not crazy, am I? Okay, let's say the scratching in the walls is mice. The house is old, it's quite possible that someone could live inside the walls, especially since there is a forest nearby. As for the neighbors, maybe this is normal. Maybe in small towns it's quite possible to behave like this. Meanwhile, I sleep with a knife and can't relax for a minute even during the day in my house. I constantly think all sorts of fables. I think why this house was so cheap, and what Thomas meant when he said that they didn't leave. Or are these not fables? I began to notice that they always disappeared at the same time. Every Friday, at exactly 2:30 a.m., the lights in their house would go out simultaneously, as if on cue. About 10 minutes later, the basement light would come on, barely visible through the crack under their back door. And then, nothing. Silence. Until the morning. That Friday, I made up my mind. I couldn't sleep. My heart was pounding. I was shaking with fear, but even more so with the obsession to figure out what was going on. Around 2 a.m., I pulled on a dark jacket, grabbed my binoculars, and quietly walked outside. I crossed the street and hid behind the bushes near the empty lot next to their house. When the lights really did go out at 2:30, I almost ran back. But I stayed. A few minutes later, the basement door slowly opened. And I saw them coming out. All three of them. In long grey robes with hoods that covered half their faces. Behind them, to my horror, there were more people. Not neighbors. I didn't recognize these faces. 5? No, 6. It was hard to see. All their faces were painted black, like soot or ash. They walked through the backyard to a small barn that I had always thought was abandoned. The door opened and I saw that candles were burning inside. Lots of them. Dim orange, as if smoked. There was no sound. Not a word. Not a rustle. Everything was happening like in a silent movie. I pressed the binoculars harder to my face, trying to see what they were doing. In the center of the barn lay a large canvas or sheet. On it something long, human-shaped, covered in fabric. Someone was standing next to it and holding a knife in his hand. I couldn't see who it was, but his hands were shaking. The others stood in a circle. And then they started, shaking their heads. All at once. Slowly, as if to invisible music. And then, the figure in the center began to move. I didn't immediately realize it was a person. Someone tied up, trembling under the cloth. Someone alive. I covered my mouth with my hand to keep from screaming. The man with the knife raised his hand, and everything stopped. The movement stopped. Only the candles continued to flicker. Then he whispered something, and everyone leaned forward. They didn't touch. They just came closer. Slowly. almost gently. I didn't see any blood or sound. Maybe it was over before it started. I don't know. I ran like they were chasing me. Through the bushes, on the pavement, barefoot. I don't even remember when I lost my shoes. The next morning I packed my things. Everything. Even the things I didn't plan on taking. I texted my landlord that I couldn't stay. I didn't explain. He didn't ask. I think he knew. Now I'm in a hotel in another state, looking for a new home. I can't sleep at night. I still watch the security footage. Sometimes it seems like someone is walking past the hotel. A random passerby. But the face is blackened with soot. I'm not going back to Pine Street. Ever. But sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat and think, I saw the ritual. And that means they saw me.